Hi, everyone. Welcome to our September Compassion Chat. My name is Susan Marshall. I am the author of the book, Mom's Gone Missing, When a Parent's Changing Life Upends Yours, which really details the journey that I was on helping both of my parents leave planet Earth. Our guest tonight has similar experiences that we're going to share as we chat. We meet the fourth Tuesday of every month at 6 o'clock for these compassion chats. Our mission here is to bring to you not only organizations as resources, but the people with the experience and the heart to help all of us caregivers who sometimes really don't even know what we're looking for, but we know we need help. So welcome. This meeting is being recorded, so please keep yourselves on mute until we get to the Q&A section at the end of the session. We will then happily welcome the questions you have. We are so privileged this evening to welcome Tim Harrington from the Wisconsin chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. And Tim, thanks so much, first of all, for making some time to chat with us this evening. These are informal, they're unscripted, as you and I have chatted about a number of times. They are recorded, so all of our guests this evening can not only be with us for this chat, but can go back and look at all of the recordings from prior chats. So again, thank you, Tim, for joining us and welcome. We like to start our chat each month by getting to know the individual talking to us. So if you would share a little bit about your journey and what brought you to the work you do today at the Alzheimer's Association.
Well, I'd be happy to. And Susan, before I get into that, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. When you and I first spoke, I think it was back in April about this. I've been looking forward to this ever since. I kept looking back at my calendar saying, am I up in August? Am I up in September? So
and yet time flies. Here we are in September already.
Right. So I am overjoyed and honored to be here. A little bit about myself. So I've been with the Alzheimer's Association officially for 7 years, or full-time for 7 years. I did a year-long stint as a contracted person running the public policy and advocacy efforts on a part-time basis outside of my other job. But what really brought me to this is my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's around 1998, 1999, and we had a 10-year journey with him. Ironically, my family never reached out to the Alzheimer's Association. In hindsight, I know we would have been better off had we done so. But we were lucky to have really, really good familial and friend support, in the fact that my dad's two best friends were a very noted doctor who handpicked his care team and his attorney and financial advisor. So we did very well, but I can say certainly for my mom being the primary caregiver, how much better off we would have been had she latched on to some of the services that the Alzheimer's Association offers. So this really became a passion of mine for my dad's journey. I got involved in advocacy. A former employee of the Alzheimer's Association reached out to me and asked me if I would be willing to go to Madison for an advocacy day around Alzheimer's in Madison. And I said, yeah. And the reason I said yeah is I wanted to learn more. And on the drive up, I was with her. I had known her husband for 20 years through softball and other things, and reached out to her after my dad's funeral saying we want to send memorials to the Alzheimer's Association in his name. And so she asked me to go to this, and on the way up I looked at her and I said, I really hate politics. And she looked at me and said, what, do you know why you're going to Madison? I said, no, I don't. I just want to learn things. I want to learn what's going on. And that was the hook. When I got in there, it was a pretty tumultuous time in Madison, in the state at the time. And I had a person, and I won't talk politics as far as left, right, up, down, doesn't matter. Look at me and said, I agree with everything you're asking for here, but in today's political climate, there's no way that I can vote for this or support it.
Isn't that interesting? And oh boy, as often or as rapidly as things change, they stay the same.
Right. And that literally, excuse my language here, but that really pissed me off. And that lit a fire under me. And I went to they took me to Washington as a volunteer advocate after that, and then got involved as a volunteer going forward. And it was my passion. It was something I was working in a private company, very for profit, and was not looking for a job, and an opportunity for this came up, and I applied for it and feel blessed every day since then that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Well, and that's wonderful, Tim. And the people that you have blessed along your way, you and I have spoken a number of times.
Yeah,
And by the way, for our audience, Tim and I met as a result of the book being published, Mom's
right.
Gone Missing.
Yep.
I think, Tim, one of our first conversations was, oh man, you related so strongly to it because of the journey you had with your dad.
Right.
And yet you represent probably one of the most famous organizations on the planet. How do you help people access the Alzheimer's Association? As you know, one of our main goals with these compassion chats is to bring humans together. Right? We
Right.
all have jobs to do, and we all have backgrounds and professions and all of that.
Right.
But when it comes to this disease, and really the cluster of diseases known as dementia and Alzheimer's,
Yep.
there is so much still to learn.
Yes.
And there's so much anxiety among caregivers. How can you help the caregivers who are anxious,
Right.
And who maybe just don't know what's happening or have bits and pieces of information?
Right.
Talk to us about how the Alzheimer's Association really helps that.
Oh, I'd be happy to. And it's funny because my initial role when I became an official member of the Alzheimer's Association was business outreach. And the idea was not a fundraising thing at all. It was, how do we help caregivers who are still in the work environment to get the support that they need? And the idea was, let's go in through, let's partner with the HR departments, with the EAP systems. And the biggest struggle that I had was when I would approach these organizations, these companies, large and small, they assumed that I was there to raise money. That all we did was fund research, which is one of our biggest focuses. We're the third largest funder of research in the world. But to convince them that I want nothing from you, I simply want to make you aware of our services so that if you get somebody who comes to you, for instance, and asks to register, for FMLA, because you're caring for your mother, you're caring for your husband, you're caring for whoever it happens to be. And there may be a time when I need to take some time off of work because these duties are going to become burdensome. And it opened the eyes of people. They really thought all we did was raise money for research.
And Tim, when was that you were approaching the businesses? You said you've been with the Alzheimer's Association for about 7 years.
Yeah, so that was around 2014.
Okay. And still then, right? Yeah. I think that is a stigma, if you will, about the Alzheimer's. It's this huge organization.
Right.
They raise money and they have a lot of events.
Right.
As a caregiver, why would I call? Who would I call? What would I ask?
Right. So, yeah, unfortunately, and I think we're doing a better job as a national organization to get away from this, but our biggest profile events are our walk, the longest day, who get national media attention, and that is raising money. But the biggest point that I can make, and that anyone from a local chapter, and there's well over 80 across the United States, local chapters, that what we are, our national organization, our biggest focus is finding a cure, funding that. But from any local chapter, like our Wisconsin chapter, our main focus, period, is helping the families in our communities that are affected through all the social, psychosocial things that we can do, support groups, care consultations. I can talk a little bit more deeply about these, early stage social engagement opportunities for family. And the reason we do the fundraising, quite honestly, is because we understand the financial burden that families are under, especially when they're caring for somebody with Alzheimer's. I think the last stat I heard is, a person caring for an elder individual with a chronic disease is an average of about $10,000 out of pocket per year. When you're talking Alzheimer's or dementia, that's closer to 15 to 16,000.
That's
incredible. And that's, the last thing that we want to do as an organization is add to that financial burden. So that's a lot of why we do the fundraising, not only for research, but to make sure that the 120,000 families in Wisconsin that are affected, that if they reach out to us, they will never be charged a penny for our services, whether it's a one-time, care consultation or go to a support group, or it's something that we follow that family for 2 or 3 years. There's no cost.
So I did not know that.
Yeah,
So that's why we have these chats. Thank you.
right.
What are the kinds of things that caregivers can look to you for?
A ton of things. I think the first thing is education. Um, Educating yourself around the disease. I just did a presentation a week ago with a gentleman you're very familiar with, wrote the foreword for your book, former Governor Shriver, who I ran into somebody I knew beforehand who's affected, whose father has it. And she was hemming and hawing about what do I need to do? I don't have the time from work to go to anything during the day. And I just said, one thing you're going to hear is the statement out of Marty that says, the only thing that's worse than Alzheimer's is ignorance about the disease. So to try and engage families as early as possible in the process, hopefully getting that early detection, early diagnosis, getting them into number one, classes to learn about the disease. And these classes range anywhere from very, very basic to skill building classes. How do you communicate with someone, throughout the stages of the disease, even when somebody becomes nonverbal, but learning as much as you can about the disease and the disease process. Second is getting into a support group or getting involved in some of the early stage social engagement opportunities that make you realize you're not the only one out there that's dealing with this. The support groups are wonderful. And we've got support groups certainly for caregivers in all stages. We've got support groups that in one room, you'll have the people in the early stages of dementia or mild cognitive impairment. In the next room, you'll have their caregivers. Going on simultaneously, we have created support groups for different types of dementia. And that's a point I think we really need to make, is that although we're called the Alzheimer's Association, we will service and help people with any type of dementia. We actually had a gentleman come to us whose wife had a form of dementia called primary progressive aphasia, which is a frontal temporal type. It deals with communication. As I'm stumbling on my word, I can't get that out. But communicating, like they can understand what you're saying, but they cannot find the word to respond. And he came to us and said, I went to this feeler meeting in the state from an organization out of Philadelphia, and they were trying to figure out if there's a need for this here. And he said it happened, I think, in Portage, Wisconsin. There were 250 people that traveled from all corners of the state to say we need this. And 2 months later, we started a support group for that demographic. And that still to this day is one of the most highly attended.
So help me as a caregiver
Mhm.
and others that I know well who have thought about support groups. And mom, when dad was in an Alzheimer's facility, attempted one too. A couple of the stigmas around support groups is one, something's wrong with me and therefore I need the support group. Two is, I really don't want to go there and hear
Right.
somebody else's depressing stories. I got enough of my own.
Right.
So help us dispel that, please.
It's, and quite honestly, my mom went through that. My mom attended literally one support group. And you don't know my mom, but it was I wasn't there, so I can only explain it from her description. It was a very hippie type thing, like pass the stick and kumbaya, and that's not my mom. And she just walked out of it and said, I'm not going back. Understand that there are multiple options, especially now that we're doing both live and virtual. You can always find a support group that you will, if you try hard enough and keep going at it, or call our office and say what one might fit me. There's always one that's going to fit you. And there are tearful moments, especially for the caregivers. But the bottom line is, one thing you walk in, I think the people that are resistant to it, it's like they don't want to admit they've got a problem. There is that stigma there, right? But when you walk in and there's a room of 8, 10, 15, 20 people, you soon realize that you're not the only one going through this. And I've facilitated a number of support groups over the past 7 years. And the one thing I will say is that the best support group that happens, I don't say a word. These people talk about what's going on. The other people in the room offer them advice based on what they've had happen. And I've really seen the end result with both this and the social engagement, early stage social engagement things, which I would like to talk about as well. But really, truly deep friendships develop from this, where people walk out of it, because the support groups typically only happen once a month. A given support group is scheduled for, the second Tuesday at 6 o'clock somewhere.
Just like our compassion chats.
Correct. There you go. That was not pre-planned, by the way, but
Fabulous.
rather serendipitous. But the friendships that come out of that, certainly during the pandemic where we had to go all virtual, I was checking in with a lot of the people in the support groups that I facilitated. And the common theme I heard is, oh, I talked to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so this past week, who are from the support group, and how much people become close. I mean, there's a group of people, and you may have heard of them, Susan, Adele, I see you're on, you may have too, a group called the Purple Canoe Club. So this is a group of people that started out in the early stage support group. None of them knew one another. And I think it grew to its height at about 20 couples. Then they came to us and asked us to start a memory cafe. Well, you get 4 or 5 years into this journey, and suddenly they've got a communal calendar that is shared amongst them. Like, so-and-so needs a ride to this art class this night. I've got an appointment. Can you do it? Long story short, they at their height were getting together literally every day of the week. Breakfast one day, lunch another day, movies at Ruby Isle on discount night, and then the other things that were out in the community supported by the Alzheimer's Association or other agencies to, for this demographic. And they literally, some of these people, I think, were toward the end, and this is not to knock any of their families, but became tighter with this group than they did, within their own family at some point. And they are still that close. A number of the people in that group, unfortunately, have their journeys ended, but the caregivers that have survived that are still some of the best crutches, best confidants, and help to those who are still in this journey.
That is so heartwarming to hear that. Yeah. What is your advice to we reluctants? I got this handled. I'm self-sufficient, right? Support group? Me? Nah. What's your best encouragement to put that aside and just show up?
I guess the blunt thing is just do it. I mean, I've been through it as a secondary caregiver. Obviously, I've seen a ton of people go through this in my professional career here. The bottom line is no caregiver with this disease can do it alone. You just can't do it. Your book shows that. Marty Schreiber's My Two Elaines talks to that extensively. I mean, he thought he could, right? He was the governor of his state. He can do everything. And when it all comes down to it, he ran up $400,000 in excess medical bills for not finding help. And the turning point for him was when he finally embraced the help. It's sometimes people need a hammer to the head to just say, you can't do this, and I think it's true for anyone. I think for male caregivers, it's a little bit more because the stereotype is that you're the strong person. You're the one that's going to support this family. You're the one who's in charge of everything. But you can't. I mean, it's just, I was a secondary caregiver and I couldn't do it. And quite honestly, a little bit of self-disclosure here, we are starting this journey with my mom right now.
Glad to hear that, Tim.
Yeah. So so we're in the beginning stages, and I fully understand that we need help. I've reached out to my colleagues. My brother, there's only 2 of us, is willing to listen to what I say. But it's something I know going into this, and I've had conversations with numerous friends of mine's parents that just basically said, you think you can do this alone, you can't, you know.
Well, so what I also heard you say, Tim, referring back to the Marty's story, pride is expensive.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's keep that in mind. You mentioned also the social engagement
yeah.
services that you provide. Talk a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. So the biggest one that we offer, and some of it's directly through us or volunteers that run these for us, and others are through like the library system in Waukesha, the Library Memory Project. But they're called memory cafes, and these are all over. The first memory cafe that we started was shortly before I came on board, and a gentleman who was in that early stage support group came to us and said, my wife asked me, what is there for me? We really didn't have much other than that support group. And he said, by the way, I have been doing a bunch of research about memory cafes that started up in the Fox Valley. And it was a couple by the name of the McFaddens, and I can't remember their names. They went to Europe and researched this and brought the concept back to Wisconsin. And what it is just that. It's a social engagement opportunity meant for people in the early to mid stages of Alzheimer's with their caregivers. So very important to know that this is not like an adult day center where you can drop off your loved one who's living with Alzheimer's and leave for an hour and a half. But they never bring up Alzheimer's. You don't talk about that. It's just a different theme every month, whether it's a craft type thing, doing puzzles, whatever it happens to be. I was at one we used to do every Christmas where a gentleman I worked with at the Alzheimer's Association worked for the Milwaukee Symphony Chorus. And he would come in and do a Christmas Carol sing along. So it's anything but talking about, it's just getting people together to socially engage. Many of these, the first one we had, when the gentleman brought us the concept, said, by the way, I've already got Panera Bread at Ruby Isle in Brookfield who's willing to host it. We just need your support. And we jumped in, and what would happen, especially when they were out in restaurants and even bars, is that everyone would stick around for lunch. And what naturally happened is the people who were living with the disease would gravitate to one table. And the caregivers would end up gravitating to the other table. And the conversations that would go on, and then there's some talk about Alzheimer's. Then the caregivers are comparing notes and, hey, I just dealt with this last week. Anyone else deal with that? So it was almost kind of a very informal support group, but it was fronted by something that was just a lot of fun for everyone involved. And it got to the point where literally people would try. I know one mother and daughter who lived in Bayside that would go to the ones up in that area, would go down to Shorewood for one, would show up in Hartford for another one. So they were traveling like 5 or 6 counties to go to these things because they enjoyed them so much, and it brought them, and it gained friendship with people who, again, were going through the same thing.
And this is exactly how communities get built.
Right.
And this is how we start small and we continue to bring people together. This is how stigma gets erased.
Right.
And it's how we can bring some joy and some humanity back to an experience that is really, really challenging.
Right.
So Tim, back to my question. If I'm a caregiver, I know all about the Alzheimer's Association. Right. I may have walked. You said there were 27 walks across
in the state. Yep.
Oh my goodness. So that's cool. And I'll do that. And I'll raise money among my friends and family. But what do if I think, okay, I can call the Alzheimer's Association for help, what do I ask?
You just be honest and let us know what you need, what your struggles are, what your questions are. It is something that, okay, so the front door to the Alzheimer's Association, the back door to the Alzheimer's Association is our 24/7 helpline, which is 800-272-3900. That initial call goes to a call center in Chicago, which is manned round the clock by 40 master's level social workers. What happens once they take that call, and you can call them for anything. I need to find a support group it's 2:00 in the morning. My spouse is completely confused, threatening me. They'll talk you through anything. What we get within 24 hours, we get a prompt here in Wisconsin that this family's out here, or this call came in. So our family services staff will reach out to you to find out what you need and find out what we can do on a local level. So you can start with the 24/7 helpline. You can call our office, in Milwaukee, whatever, but let us know what you need. And you may not know what you need.
And that's
But
really the challenge, right? I
right,
don't, I won't pick up my phone because I don't know what to say.
right.
Or I'll
And
pick up the phone and I'll babble. But what I'm hearing you say is do that.
do that. Yeah. And you know what? We will, if it's me on the phone, which it likely wouldn't be. I do deal with families, but there's, people who are more focused on that. But what any of us will do is we'll start asking those probing questions. What do you need? What are you having struggles with? What's going on with your loved one? How far along are they? We'll ask all those questions. We'll ask the probing questions, and we'll figure out where we can help you. But make the call. And I think it's really important to note, and we push this really hard, when you first start noticing changes, get checked out, whether it's your primary care physician, whether it's calling us and finding, what do I do? Are these signs of dementia? And we've got a class that talks about the 10 signs of dementia. But try to get that diagnosis as early as possible. Partially because the services that we offer, you can potentially get that person who's living with it involved in the decisions that need to be made down the road. Who is my care team going to be? Let's look at the finances. Let's, what do you want your end of life? And unfortunately, that has to be brought into the conversation, because there's no cure for this disease right now. So what do you want? Do you want to live at home as long as you can? Would you prefer to go into, a type of setting that can support you? All those decisions that may need to be made, especially if the person living with the disease is the one that always did the finances. Well, you know what? You need to be looking at that, because there's going to be a time when you're not going to be able to do that. So where are the important documents? Who do we need to bring in and talk to? Financial advisors, lawyers, whatever it happens to be. But the bottom line is make the call. And again, it starts, I think we talked about, it starts with education around the disease. It starts and it continues with getting the support you need, continuing to learn. And again, the services that we don't offer, we know the people in your given community that do offer those, and we will, there's no competition in my mind, in our mind, there's no competition for this. Our goal, the goals of the ADRCs, the goals of, other partnering, you mentioned in our talk before this, Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute, all of our goals is to make sure that families affected are getting the support and education and everything that they need. It's not who gives it, it's just that you get it.
That's
So
yeah, and that's reassuring, because that is always a question. If I make a call, is it the right one? And
right,
knowing that, not just as we're building a community of caregivers, there's a community of resources
right.
who have joined hands to help us get what we need. I've got one more question, and then I'm going to open it up. Gosh, I can't believe how fast this time always goes. I'll open it up for questions in a minute. But as you know, Tim, I am one of 6.
Yep.
So I've got 5 siblings. As we came, I think the first reaction to whether it's Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment, dementia of any sort is, they're just getting older.
Right.
And because each sibling has a unique relationship with the parent, our belief, the strength of our denial, our willingness to learn more, our ability to contribute to a discussion is all over the map.
Yeah.
I know that you've talked with a lot of people who are in
Right.
that very situation. What would the Alzheimer's Association be able to help in that regard? If
Sure.
I'm one of several and we've got no consensus among siblings, what should be done?
Right. Well, first I'll say I feel fortunate, I guess. I would have loved to have grown up in a big family. All my friends came from huge families, and that's where I learned music. That's where I learned everything, being the oldest too. But I'm lucky in the fact that it's my mom, my brother, his wife, and I. And through my dad's journey with what we've got starting now with my mom, we're all on the same page. But that is not normally the case. Your book spoke to that very clearly. I will make one quick statement in the fact that however someone individually deals with it, while there may be better ways to deal with it, it's not wrong. It's the way that they're processing it. I actually watched a play today called In the Garden, that deals with three siblings dealing with their father's Alzheimer's, and it was an incredible play, and they all dealt with it a little bit differently. One thought he could heal dad holistically by making him blueberry smoothies and whatnot. The middle child was very, like, okay, we just can't support dad. We need to get him into better care. The older brother was blaming everyone else for not doing things right. We can help with that. And the best example I can give was shortly after I started with the Alzheimer's Association. A family came in for what we call a care consultation, which is a one-on-one or one-on-family sit-down counseling session, if you will, with one of our family service people. And the one that they met with, the person that met with them is one of the most incredible people I've ever met. And she's no longer with us, but we've got people just like her with us. So rest assured, you are in good hands. But this family came in, it was 14 people. There were 12 people in the room and 2 people on the phone. And no one was on the same page as to what they believed about the diagnosis, about what they felt was best going forward, on and on. So these counseling sessions, we typically schedule for an hour and a half, but that's not written in stone. It's whatever it takes is what you've got. 3.5 hours later, that meeting ended. And by the time that meeting ended, all 14 of those family members were on the same page with what the best path was for dad, acknowledging the diagnosis, and there were follow-up meetings after that. This can be a one-time thing. More often than not, it's okay, we're going to check in every couple weeks, every month, every week, whatever they need. But that's the best. I mean, that's the most dramatic example that I can give. And it's, like I say, I grew up around a ton of huge families, and I watched the family dynamics when things would go a little amiss. And, everyone's got their opinion. In a large family, there's always people who have very, very strong opinions. In a small family, it can be the same thing, but it's easier to, between me and my brother, if we both got a hard opinion, we can hash that out. But literally, I mean, these counseling sessions, and I don't even want to call them counseling, but guidance sessions or whatnot, not only did it could get them on the same page, but it also had them communicating better amongst one another and opened up some of the people that may be in denial. And I think a lot of the denial, and I think you saw this in your family, Susan, is I don't want to grasp what mom's going through now. I still need mom,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I am ever so curious, what in 3.5 hours brought these people together? What was the secret sauce?
I wasn't there.
Okay.
All I know is I heard the story, and I've used it as an example, and it did amaze me that it happened, in that short a time, actually, with 14 people.
Right.
But I mean, I can say I still keep in touch. She's retired. I still keep in touch with that person, and quite honestly, she is the person that also counseled Marty for many years. But just a dynamic person who was in a caregiving role, both professionally and with her family for many years, and just an incredibly knowledgeable. And again, we don't have her, but we've still got that level of expertise in our staff.
I think that experience, and again, it's more than the technical skills, right? As we're trying to impress every time we have a chat, it's people with a heart for this work.
Right.
Yes, there are techniques. Yes, there are things, but it takes a special person to really see, hear, and appreciate people, particularly when they're being a little bit ornery. So,
right. And I can say certainly our staff here in Wisconsin, we've got I think a full staff of 33 or 34. Probably 90% of our staff, but I would say 100% of our staff on the family services side, the ones that educate people, the ones that are doing the counseling, like myself, have walked the journey. Whether most of us, the greater majority of us personally, and then some others also through work. One of the people that's a lead right now, was a professional caregiver in some of the most difficult, like adult day type situations that you can imagine. She's dealt with everything face to face with those people living with it. So it's not only that, and this is not a pat on back on me that we're good at what we do, but we have a true passion for it, and we've gone through this personally. I can honestly say that as busy as we get, and it can get pretty busy. If we're busier because there's a family out there who wasn't getting services that now is, we're happy to do that. We would much rather be working long hours and dealing with this than finding out too late that there's a family out there that has not reached out or has not got the help that they need.
Well, God bless you for that, because when we have the need, I will speak simply from my own experience and fess up, we're not always real easy to deal with.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to extend an invitation now to our listeners to, if you have a question, please unmute and fire away.
So I have a couple of comments that I think will elicit some more feedback or information from Tim. But first of all, so nice to see you, Tim. It's been a long time.
Likewise,
And
Adele.
second of all, what an amazing organization. Having worked, in this field for more than 30 years, you and your team and the services that you offer, you have been integral in my ability to serve my clients and to guide them to resources, you being one of the main ones. It's just, I can't imagine what we would all do without you and your team. So let me start there. Second of all, in the early stages, since I've counseled thousands of families over the years, there are so many things that I hear, especially from the adult children, when I've had many long phone conversations, and they start off often with, well, my mom's doing, she's doing okay. She's getting older. And you already know elements of what's coming next,
right?
Because that's the start of sometimes it's denial. Sometimes it's just the lack of education that you've all talked about already. And so one of the things I would remind them constantly is, I don't know enough of your story, even though I've listened to you for an hour. There are others who will extrapolate from the conversation that we just had, something entirely different. And there are so many things that can be done to slow the erosion of memory loss.
Right.
There are no guarantees. There's no magic pill, but there are so many things. And so instead of waiting until she's not doing okay, or until she's further down the path, I know it's not easy, but now is the time. And we talk about the difference between being in charge of now and letting your loved one maybe be mad at you because you're going down a path that they're not interested in going down. Or as alternative is put it aside for a while, let them do what they want and hold off on taking some steps, and then dealing with the crisis, which 9 times out of 10 is going to be less successful because you have less choices and all these other things. So that's one piece of it that I want you to throw out there. The second thing is, I have come to recognize that the closer someone gets to, I'm going to say failure or decline or more challenging health, the less inclined they are to talk about it. The earlier in the stages we can get them to start the conversation. It doesn't have to be about, Mom, I think it's time to move or leave your home or whatever. It's just, here's what I'm seeing. Let's talk about that, or whatever it might be. So waiting for a while is making your job harder. Give me your thoughts on all of that, because I know you've dealt with that 1,000 times.
Right. Well, I think to your last point, I think, and it's a weird slope. Okay, so when you start seeing somebody close to you, and I'll speak specifically to my mom and dad, starting to decline. They were both very social people. My mom my dad loved a crowd. My dad could work a crowd like no one. My mom was always wanted to be in the middle of conversation. She didn't fully realize what was going on until people probably a year or two into it, mentioned, you do realize, my dad's name was Tim as well, that you do realize that Tim is now deferring any questions to you by a nod.
Mm.
And that was second nature, and my mom would just pick it up. And I kind of equate it to, seeing friends of mine's kids grow up that I don't see but every 3, 4, 6, maybe, months or a year, how much they grow and how much they mature in that time. I think, on the converse of this, toward the end of life, when you're dealing with dementia, you as a primary caregiver, if you're living at home, it's so small and so incremental that you may not be recognizing it. You may be naturally, just doing things to, you're not thinking of covering it. This is just natural. This is what I'm going to do. So be very aware of what people are willing to tell you, and take it seriously. And, it's the support that we get. And I kind of lost everything you said there because I was focusing on the one answer, Adele. But, I think it really is that you have to be willing to be open to help. You have to, when you start seeing things, like you say, have that conversation early. One of the things that I heard from my first boss at the Alzheimer's Association, you probably remember well, Adele, Krista, impressed upon me that the statistic out there was, when somebody goes in and gets that diagnosis, and I think it's getting better. People are getting those diagnoses earlier in the process. But at this time, 7, 8, 9 years ago, it really was when somebody was probably in the mid stages of the disease. They're handed a packet of material, some of it being information about the Alzheimer's Association or the local ADRC or whatever it happens to be, but that gets thrown in a drawer. And they don't look at it until they go into crisis. So understanding that the sooner you get connected with support, whether it be through us, whether it be through the Aging and Disability Resource Center, whether it be going online and getting some education, the better off you're going to be. And one of the things that we've done, we're working very hard on this and have just really made some strides in the past 2 years, is knowing this, that people aren't going to look at that packet for 3, 4, or 5 years. Is working on a program where basically it's we're trying to get partnered with the physician outreach. So we created a form called Direct Connect, which we want to get into the medical systems. We've been successful in a fair amount of them in Wisconsin. We've still got a ways to go. But what this does is when that person gets the diagnosis, they or their loved one are given the opportunity to sign off on this HIPAA compliant form that they then turn over to us, and we'll give the family probably a week or two. This is not a fun diagnosis to get, so we're not going to call them the next day, but we will get in touch with them within the first 2 weeks and say, what can we do for you? So it's us contacting them giving permission for us to contact them and try to get them engaged in whatever they may need or the services that will help them early in the process. And not only does it help the family, but this also takes some burden off of these diagnostic clinics that, may have 3 or 4 doctors and 1 social worker and 2 nurses, and they don't have the time to do it. So we're finding this to be quite successful. I believe I may be stepping out of turn here, but I'm pretty sure that with Aurora being, Advocate Aurora being the largest provider in the state now, that we are now actually in their official medical system.
Wow.
That's very reassuring. One of the other things I'd like to toss out here too, that we've talked about in a number of these chats for caregivers, is if something strikes you, write it down.
Yes.
Keep a behavior journal, because you will over time begin detecting patterns. And then it's not, I feel this, it's like, this is what I've been noticing, to your point, Adele. Yeah. And if there's something that it just doesn't feel right to you, make a note of it. You don't have to do anything with it right now, but just capture it.
And I will add to that absolutely. And Susan, you and I have talked about how you journal. You've got volumes of journals from your, but do not hesitate as that caregiver. That prior to that exam with the doctor, prior to the next appointment, if it's just a checkup, you as a caregiver have every right to call that doctor ahead of time, call that doctor's office and explain to them exactly what you're seeing. That's a help to them. And it can be a help to you. One of the things that everyone is on this journey is going to have to deal with is at some point taking the keys away from that person who's living with. Explain that to the neurologist, explain that to the doctor. In my dad's case, I believe the neurologist actually wrote a prescription on my mom's urging to say, my dad can't drive anymore. But the things that they can, if they get a hint as to what you are seeing, because I mean, the truth of the matter is too, especially if somebody's not in the late stages, people with Alzheimer's find ways to cover up what they're doing. And that 20-minute or 40-minute exam, they could win an Oscar for that time, and then be completely confused when you're driving them home. But they know what they're going into, so you as a caregiver giving the doctor those hints, the things that you've observed, is a great help to the doctors, and can take some of the burden off of you, because some of the things that you may have to say to your loved one, which aren't easy, that doctor can take that burden away. So it's very important to journal and take all those notes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. And if you feel like you're kind of making book, get over that, because you're not trying to have something negative happen. You're trying to keep your loved ones safe, whole, and loved.
And I will add to it, there's actually a class that we teach, one of our normal or standard classes, called Understanding and Responding to Dementia-Related Behavior. So it's how to deal with things in the moment. And one of the things we teach in there is when you do run into a challenging situation, right after you're done with it, do a journal entry. Put down what time it happened, what time of the day it was happened, what was happening before and after this event. Were there uncomfortable things in the room? Sundowning is a big thing, shadows at dusk. What you did that worked, what you didn't do, or what you did that didn't work. And keep that at the ready, because not only does it help you as that primary caregiver, if, like in my mom's case, caring for my dad, if she would have done that, we didn't know enough back then to do that. When my brother and I came in to spend a weekend or to spend a week to get her out of town, that would have been very helpful for us to go back to this journal to say, okay, Dad's going through this. I haven't seen this before, but this has happened 3 other times and this was what worked. And even if it gets, if it moves into where you've got to get professional care, that is invaluable information for, if it's a nursing home or a senior living facility that they're going into, for that staff. So all those things, journaling, incredibly, incredibly important.
Thank you. I'm watching the time here, and I want to be respectful. We could have this conversation for hours.
Yes.
and we tend to. I want to offer one last chance for anyone else who has a question for Tim before we sign off and say sayonara for the evening. Going once, going twice. Tim, thank you so much. You are just an incredible resource. I want to remind all of our listeners that this recording and the others we've had since March are available for you at susanamarshall.com. You can find out more about Tim at that location. And Tim, the best place for people to reach you?
Go through, actually you can go through the 24/7 helpline, which is 800-272-3900. They can actually soft transfer to my extension. And I guarantee I'll also always get back to you. My email address is Harrington, so THARRINGTON@ALZ.org.
Wonderful. Tim, thank you so much. I can't tell you how valuable you are, not only to our community, but to everyone in our audience who is struggling with these diseases. Again, Alzheimer's, dementia, with all of those flavors. Thank you all for joining us. You can also find a copy of my book, Mom's Gone Missing: When Parents Changing Life Upends Yours, at susanamarshall.com. Our guest next month, October 26th, is Jennifer Harters. Tim mentioned her earlier, with the ADRC in Waukesha County. Thanks again, all of you, for joining us this evening. Tim, my heart goes out to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. And you know what? And I will give a plug. I heard about Susan's book back in early fall last year. I knew I was doing an event with her to interview her about it, and I waited to read it till about a week beforehand, so it was fresh in my head. And I think in that week I read it 3 times. So it's outstanding, really good information. Buy the book. Buy the book. You'll love it.
Ditto.